if we didn't have the color white. We wouldn't understand what we could contrast it with. If we just saw the color black, we wouldn't know what white was. We wouldn't know what was dark and what wasn't, right? So when we are close to purity, we can understand, we have a better grid for right and wrong. When we move away from purity, when we move away from holiness, when we move away from the presence of God, when we even move away from just the pure idea of God, whether we believe or not, as a society, not as individuals, but as a society, things right and wrong becomes extremely foggy. It's hard to really tell the difference. In fact, we just sort of like make it up as we go. Like, sounds right today, must be right. Feels good, why not it be the moral compass that we go by? This is what it was all talked about in Scripture. We're gonna, give me a click on that screen, will you? All right. Yeah, we're going to look at 2 Timothy chapter 3. This is such a good verse that defines the times that we live in. And this verse is so interesting because it was, you know, we see that the name on it is Timothy. Timothy didn't write it, but it was a letter written to him by Paul, who was an apostle. He was kind of one of the original gangsters of the first church. And Paul wrote this letter to one of the pastors at this church, and I think Timothy served in Ephesus and was kind of a regional leader over a bunch of churches there, and he's instructing him. So he's writing this letter to Timothy, but as I read it, I'm saying, I know that Paul is writing prophetically here. Paul is writing this understanding that, yeah, it will bear witness to Timothy, but this is for a generation that hasn't even been born yet. And I believe that we are living in this time. You know, it says, even the first line, it says, but mark this, there will be terrible times in the last days. How many of you believe that we're in the last days? Most of us. Now, do you know that the disciples believed, if we would have asked the disciples that, they would have raised their hand. Every generation has believed that they're living in the last days. So are they wrong? No, actually that they're right. That we're always supposed to be in the mode, in the mindset that Jesus could be returning at any moment. All of us are supposed to be living with the mindset that we're living in the last days. But this is particularly eerie, as we'll read it. So there will be terrible times in the last days. People will be lovers of themselves. Does that bear witness to you? Lovers of money. They will be boastful. Do you feel like we live in a culture where pride and boastfulness is exalted, or do you feel like we live in a culture where humility is the value? No, we live in a culture where pride and boastfulness, abusive, disobedient to their parents. Come on. Man. It's just so interesting that he put that in there. Out of all the things that he could have said, he needed to address this issue, that even this conflict between children and parents is going to increase. And in the last times, that children are going to have an extremely hard time obeying their parents, because the culture will say differently. Will say, do what you want. That is actually the right thing to do. That you actually know better than your parents. It's interesting. I watch cartoons with my kids, and a lot of times these movies, it's like the kids have this plot, and they're trying to do this whole thing without their parents knowing, or they know, in a sense, they know better than their parents and kind of what's going on and what the real world is like. I mean, even cartoons. You know, they're sneaking out and saving the world at night, and then coming home and mommy's tucking them in or waking up for school or something. And it's like they live this secret life, and like, you know, we exalt that. Like, that's a really great thing. I just question it a little bit. Okay, that's my own little tangent. We'll go away from there.